Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio once again. It's me. I'm afraid you're stuck with me for the second night in a row because I know I did a show last night on immigration and St. George's flags and debates in schools, and I'm here again. This time a completely different topic because we're going to be focusing this evening on what I think is another equally important topic, which is about RSHE, the curriculum, how teachers can teach it. The best tools that we have available to do that. It's going to be a really, really interesting conversation. And the show this evening is supported by the Peach Wellness Academy. If you haven't heard of that yet, you are going to be well acquainted with it in the next hour or so as we discuss all these different points about RSHE and how to teach it and how Peach Wellness Academy can help you to do that. And I'm joined by Chris and Suzy Peach. Welcome. Good evening to you both.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Exciting times. Now, Chris and Suzy, I'm going to let you sort of introduce yourselves first off the bat. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your story, why we're here, and why we're talking about what we're talking about.
Sure, yeah. You start.
We're both doctors, medical doctors. Suzy will talk about her career in a moment. She's as a GP. I'm an occupational health doctor, and I previously had experience in general surgery and emergency medicine. And over the last sort of 3 years, we made inroads into an idea, which actually was Suzy's original idea from many years ago, about improving health literacy in our young people. And that's the sort of taster intro. And part of this came about through frustrations in both of our jobs in our clinic time, dealing with what should be the healthiest demographic or part of our demographic, so young people, coming in with problems or issues which really could have been prevented with better knowledge or understanding about various aspects of their health, whether that be physical, mental or social. And we thought there must be a better way we can do this. And that stimulated us into thinking about how and why and how we might do this. So in our clinic, we can do one-on-ones, and that's great, but we wanted to have a bigger impact and we wanted to prevent these issues so they didn't have to come into our clinic. So we took ourselves out of our medical careers and began to develop and have now are just about to launch the Peach Wellness Academy, or it's Peach Wellness Academy, which is a digital health and wellbeing education platform for schools. And the first product we're launching is for secondary schools, age 11 to 18, but also it can be used by people older than that age. And again, it's designed to address many of these issues that we see in our clinic that were really frustrating for us, and how we could then really help people to manage that themselves, to develop a better understanding, better knowledge, improve their individual health literacy, and therefore make different decisions with regards to health. And we're going to talk about things like resilience. We're going to talk things about understanding yourself, your body, and your mind. But I think it's good to hand over to Suzy to tell her story.
I think you told it. Essentially, I always say that we know this problem very, very well because this is our day jobs. And Peach Wellness Academy was born out of frustration. And what we wanted to do was bring our knowledge as healthcare professionals directly to young people and give everyone collectively a better understanding of their minds and their bodies and the world around them. And we started off kind of thinking we'll go into schools and we'll do that directly. give one-off workshops. And the feedback we got from schools, because we involved young people and teachers very, very early in this process, was, yeah, brilliant. We love it when people do that, but we hate it when they go away again and we don't know what to do once you go away. We don't have anything that we can rely on. So could you create a digital resource? So from day one, we've listened and we have worked alongside schools. We've surveyed thousands of teams and teachers and healthcare professionals and said, what are we missing? What's going on the ground? Because we know what's going on our ground, but what's going on collectively, and just reacted to that, basically.
Amazing. I think it's important to mention here, we're obviously going to talk about a lot of the different things that young people present with to you or other healthcare professionals and just in schools in general. That's what we're going to sort of dig into tonight. But I think it's also quite good to point out that you guys, if we're talking about credibility, I can't quite, I mean, you're like, you know, sometimes it's tough sometimes to say, okay, where's your credibility? I think with you two guys, pretty self-explanatory, you know.
I hope so. We to back us up though, because you know, especially an A-type like me, I'm forever self-doubting. My background is general practice, but with a heavy influence in paediatric and adolescent health. So it's always been my special area of special interest.
Sure.
And the bit that I kind of thrive in the most. But in addition to that, we have a team of 30 health and wellbeing experts that we've used to help write, curate, and deliver the content. So it isn't just us.
Yeah.
And on our website, you can see a list of everyone. So we have, you know, a CAMS psychiatrist, a CAMS clinical psychologist, an educational psychologist, 2 sexual health leads, an obstetrician. Everything you can imagine is there. Just to give it that little bit more, making sure that we really truly are as up to date as possible.
I've seen it. It's an impressive list of people on there. It's impressive.
And we've tried to make sure we pick people that are quite engaging as well.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, that's important. If a lot of your content is student facing and so on, then I think, but you know, from what I'm seeing, it's absolutely fantastic. So, so anyway, 5 days. Is it 5 days? Till
Tuesday. So,
Tuesday the 14th.
Okay, well, that's exciting.
Yeah, 5 days. I know.
But are you going to have like a party as well, or
I
something?
think we're probably just going to
Collapse.
exhaust ourselves.
Collapse. Yeah, it's only just started, but we'll collapse before it starts.
Yeah.
Right.
No party, but we are going on holiday a week after that because it's much needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a very intense year. You know, this is you know, quite a project to move out of our medical careers, although, you know,
I don't like that
well, not move out, we're still practicing, but to really, you know, formally change. When you're in medicine or whichever specialty you're practicing, you're very much in that lane, and you know, you're either working full-time or part-time, and you know, you're surrounded by your peers who are all in that same discipline. So it's quite a daunting prospect to sort of remove yourself out of that sector, should I say, and take yourself into the teaching. And you know, we were always very sort of conscious of, we don't want to come in here and tell teachers how to do things, because we're not teachers, but we know they are at the coalface dealing with all these issues, and we also see these issues in a different from a different perspective. So we wanted to sort of, you know, synergize. You know, you hear about collaborating more, you know, between departments or between sectors, and it's, you know, it's often talked about, but how well is it done? So we wanted to really take ourselves over into that space, take the experts into that, because we know that teachers are under a lot of pressure, you know, budgetary issues, staffing issues, in the pace of life in the digital world that we're in, and the problems that creates, all part of what we're addressing. You know, it makes life very difficult to teach, and we know that. And we have, you know, teachers involved in our program. We have many teacher friends, and you know, the same messages are coming back. And it's, you know, we realize we're, you know, we want to help our colleagues. You know, we know we're under a lot of pressure in our careers in medicine, in the different disciplines within healthcare. So we understand that, and we want to try and lighten that load. And that's really what this resource is designed to do, is to take the experts straight to the student, help the teachers deliver in this area, and lighten the burden in doing so. You know,
I think as well, with some of this content is quite niche, and some of it, you know, what's expected of teachers to teach in the wellbeing area, or even not just teach, but what are you expected to do in addition to your day job in terms of pastoral care and support for kids and everything else. That's huge. And some of the topics, especially with the RSHE reform now and the new guidance, they're quite difficult to teach on at the best of times, especially with teenagers, especially with a group that you know. there's a lot in there that teachers are going to have to learn to deliver, and I don't envy them that, because it's a big change. But for us, this is our bread and butter. It's our day-to-day job. We're incredibly comfortable with talking about all the sensitive topics in a way that's relevant for young people. So yeah, I have no idea where I was going with this point. I've forgotten already.
Well, whatever it was pretty good. I think what you were getting at is that the teacher's job of teaching or embedding RSHE into teaching is quite difficult. Some of the topics are tricky, and also that they've been updated a lot of times recently, which makes it probably a little bit more challenging. I think the point you were making is that, which I know, is that you guys are well aware of that, and I think you offer something which is very much tailored and appropriate for the teachers to use within the classroom or during form time or whatever it is in lessons. I mean, that's what I was going to ask you is how you envisage the Peach Wellness Academy to be used. Who do you envisage to use it, and how do you envisage it to be used?
What we don't want is for people to think that this is an RSHE resource.
Sure.
It ticks that box, yes, if that's all you care about. But truly, what we did was sat down together and said, what are our frustrations? What are the common things that young people present with in our clinics? Where's the real lack of knowledge here? And mapped out what we felt should be covered. And then we went on to survey all the teams and teachers and healthcare professionals. And we developed our own, I hate the word curriculum, but our own program. Covering everything that's relevant, it's up to date, it's evidence-based. And then we looked at the UK curriculums and said, what actually are schools supposed to do? And compared what we're trying to do with that. I would say that what we offer is significantly more. I thought that the previous RSHE curriculum was poor, and it didn't address the needs at all of young people. So seeing this reform actually is really, really good news, I think, because the government and DfE are obviously making positive changes in the right direction, which is great. But yeah, we do more than that. The point in this is, if you improve young people's health literacy, so how much they know about health, they will make better choices. They will be healthier teens and adults. And actually, interestingly, health literacy is also linked with educational attainment. So the idea is, if you can project your brain far enough and really truly focus on well-being from a proactive perspective rather than reactive, you should collectively improve everyone's health, and therefore you'll have a better, healthier cohort. You'll have better outcomes. It also happens to tick the RSHE box.
Yes.
And I don't know if you want to explain how to use them.
Yeah. So this is a digital resource, as we said. We have two sort of products that can offer. So as a school, if you wanted to incorporate the Peach Wellness Academy in your school, you would sign your school up. And what that would do is every individual student would get a login to their account. That gives them access to the program that Suzy mentioned, of all the different modules covering all the different topics that you mentioned that cover off RSHE and requirements and more. And it's not a start and finish program. It's not something you start at this point and you end and you have to work your way through. It's asynchronous, because what we recognize is that everybody develops at different times and has different needs. Even amongst peer groups, different things happen to people at different times. So what we wanted to do is have a flexible program that, when it's relevant to that student, they can go in there and have a look. Now, obviously, they can't jump to the end of things. They have to start, if it's a complex subject, they have to start with the basics and then it moves through.
Yeah.
But they can move around to the different topics that are, that don't rely on, the previous ones or introductory material. And that allows that flexibility to go in and when they're ready to learn, when they want to and they're interested, go through some of this material, and then they can go away and come back. They can do it in or outside of school. It's accessible 24/7. What schools also get with this is a number of facilitator logins. So we call them facilitators. That's for teachers who might be involved in pastoral care or in guidance or in teaching RSHE. They will get a login. They get access to the same material. And what they also get as with that account is access to learning guides, which we will produce with each topic. So that, again, taking the burden off teachers, it says, if you want to use this in your classroom-based learning, which we recognize is useful, we can't do that. We're a digital resource, but you can. Then here it is, so we're trying to minimize the burden again, so they can just incorporate this in the way in which they see fit. So that might be into their existing programs, or if they have nothing else, then they've got a good stable basis to start with. So
we've had feedback from schools that have said, yeah, that's probably how we most likely use it. So technically, they could do nothing. They could literally plug and play and let kids just go for it. But if they want to be more hands-on, the teacher still doesn't have to learn the material because it's all delivered for them. And the lesson guides tell the teachers everything that's covered within that lesson and other suggested classroom activities that you could do to further improve and embed the learning. And a lot of the schools have said they would probably say, like, let's say we have to teach on vaping this term, right? Go away and do the first module on vaping on PWA, and then next week do an accompanying lesson, and then they could the next week perhaps set homework to do the second module on vaping, and the same thing again. So there's flexibility there for schools that want to be really involved, but also for other ones that are really struggling and want something but don't really have the teaching resource to deliver the content themselves.
Sure. I mean, I work in an international context, so I work in a British international school, and in the region that I work in northern Spain, the context is probably going to be significantly different to central London, for example. So I think it's very helpful to have options to be able to sort of curate what you're doing, both from a student perspective, but also from a teacher perspective, and think about it that way. I think that's really good.
Actually, that's one of the main things that comes through the suggested lesson guides frequently is that we say, what is the content? Find out the context in where you live. How do you access this? What is the law about whatever it is, whatever drug, or where you live, and discuss that. And why does that differ from another country? So these things come up a lot, and we've obviously been aware as a digital product that the reach here, although it was born in the UK, the reach here it's an international product. So we've made sure that we cover lots of international topics.
Yes, and you've got to remember as well that we're all human beings, so although there'll be cultural differences and localized specific issues, the problems, like for instance with online social media, they are global. They're the same whether you're a teenager here in Spain, in India, and anywhere around the world. So there's that sort of interwoven common aspect to it. The core content is applicable to all. And I suppose we should talk about the way it's delivered. So we've talked about this as a platform. They can get a login. What we recognize today as well is that, that's probably what's the most innovative part of our platform and our content, is that there's been significant changes in the neurodevelopmental way in which young people consume information or take information on board. We know, like, it's common to understand that children don't have great attention spans at the moment, teenagers. And they lack patience, and sometimes don't appreciate the virtue of patience or the value of endeavor, going at something. And we can talk about the medicalized aspect of that, about attention and hyperactivity, but we recognize those changes, and that's largely brought about by the digital era, the sort of the rise of online scrolling, and we can go into some of those aspects of what's going on there. But we have to flex the way we teach so that we can get maximum engagement, because we hear a lot about disengaged youth, people not attending school, or with problems and just not able to learn. So we want to meet them where they're at, and that's in the digital space. You can't avoid it. It's not going to go away. So we created at the very core, the design was about making it maximal engagement for young people. So it's 90+%, 95% video content. And they're all short videos with rapid scene changes, so it keeps that engagement. And interspersed throughout that, we'll have quick quizzes, which we know the students love from our surveys and from our trial schools.
That's
to
great.
test knowledge, and also to test what they think they know versus what they actually know and what they've learned from the content. And one of the strongest aspects about our platform and our program content is that we feature lived experience. So real stories, real people, people who have been through something, a challenge, a struggle, an event, and they are very kindly agreed to tell their story. And we often start with that, teenagers growing up, wanting to develop their own identity and their own opinions. They often, don't don't want to listen to teachers or don't want to listen to their parents.
Don't want to listen to healthcare
They don't want to listen to healthcare professionals, yeah. But they can't dismiss a real life story. Somebody who's really been so that sets the tone. And then we have our experts, which Suzy mentioned, will then go and explain the distilled points about what's the practical information and understanding you need to know about that topic. And then, as you say, we intersperse it with quizzes. And we also have access to what's called our community, our Peach Wellness community, which is a forum, if you like, an online forum. So when you go into the platform, depending for school students, they are sort of partitioned into 3 age groups. Depending on their age, which they'll know when they enter the date of birth, they will go into their peer group community space, and the community forum sort of mirrors the platform in terms of the subjects and topics, and that allows them to take the conversation further. So what they've learned and what they've understood, they might have questions, they might have things they want to talk about. This allows them to talk to anybody within their peer group, globally, internationally, and what we want to do is build this community of conversation about these topics. Because
and the teachers, they're all linked up to.
So the teachers will go into their own forum as well. So again, from a guidance, sharing best practice, ideas, understanding, and the same for
within that forum. Do the teachers get? I mean, within the forum space, is that just for the teachers to chat, or do they have people from your side as well? Like, sort of.
No. Just for them. So it's just for them to go in and basically have that sort of peer-to-peer conversation about the challenges, how you're doing, and you could use it to share best practice about how you're teaching these issues or the challenges. And it's we recognize that people in these roles can often still feel isolated and not have other colleagues to talk to. So this is about getting broad perspectives from around the world, different issues, bringing that community together. So it's that collective approach, that whole school approach, where we can all talk about these things, for the students to break down stigmas, to start talking more widely, not just in with what the pals are saying about such and such, or what's been passed down from from their cousins or whoever. This is about broadening that conversation. So a really powerful aspect to sort of reinforce learning, to get different perspectives, and hopefully promote more engagement in that space. Because if we collectively bring up everybody's knowledge or health literacy, but then we're going to get on better. We're going to understand each other a bit better. We're going to be less judgmental, and we're going to be in a better position to understand our bodies, our minds, make different health decisions that that really benefit us and make us therefore in a better position to learn. So that's the whole point, is to try and generally improve the basics. You'll have heard of things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We address things like that. Let's get these basics, this foundational knowledge right, so that you can work from a foundation of facts rather than hearsay or misinformation, which we know is prolific.
Some sort of crazy reel on TikTok that has no context.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, listen, talking of health, I get a lot of stick in school from my fellow teachers and also from my fellow Teachers Talk Radio hosts, because, and this is the perfect opportunity for me to ask you this, I drink a heck of a lot of these.
Okay.
And to be honest, it's my vice, and it always has been. So I thought before we actually kick off with the serious stuff, I thought I would ask you guys, because you've got all the expertise to answer these questions. Because I've asked ChatGPT, I've asked I've been into Reddit. I've asked Reddit for advice on this. Is this killing Tom Rogers, or is it making him stronger?
Oh, right. I potentially both. Yeah. So the thing
it's not going to be making me stronger, but I was hoping you were going to say it's not making you stronger, but it's also not killing you. You said both. Brilliant.
Has Coke Zero got? It's Coke Zero, right?
It's Coke Zero. I mean,
has it got caffeine?
No. So I'll tell you the ingredients to this.
I think it still has the caffeine worries me.
No, it has got caffeine. I think it's basically it takes out it replaces. I mean, essentially, it replaces the sugar with flavors and sweeteners and whatever. And there's still caffeine in it, but obviously Coke Zero is supposed to have zero sugar. Coke Diet, I think Coke Light has a bit of, I don't know. Anyway,
who knows? Who knows?
caffeine levels are quite low in it. I've done a lot of research on this because I wanted to know if it was killing me or not.
Yeah.
So
If we
apparently,
break it down by ingredient, right? I don't know if you're going to want to hear this or not, because I don't know how biased your Reddit reading has been. But
okay. The stuff I read, I must admit, I took all the stuff that was going to make me feel better as a human being.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll tell you the bits that made me feel better as a human being first, and then we can dismiss everything else.
We'll start with that then,
So,
right? You're hydrating yourself. That's good, obviously.
95%. 95% of a can is water.
Okay.
All right, that made me feel better. Then the caffeine content in Coke Zero is actually lower than like coffee, for example.
Okay.
Right. The bit that worries me is the additives and the flavorings and the sweeteners. The caffeine content, I think you'd have to drink like a Coke Zero, something like 3 Coke Zeros is 1 Starbucks coffee in terms of caffeine content. So the caffeine content isn't actually hugely significant. I think it's the sweeteners and the additives that were the ones. In fact, we were going to discuss addictions later. So this is probably an addiction. I'm not going to allow you to ask me how many of these I drink a day.
No,
this is why I get so much stick in school.
I'll let you keep that to yourself. But I think the thing with this is we don't fully know. And this is why evidence and clinical studies are nuanced, because it's not in Coca-Cola's best interest to launch a perfect clinical trial and take millions of people and give them loads of Coke and don't give it to the other group and see what happens. No one really knows the full effect of all the additives yet. Obviously, there's a suggestion that it's not good for you and that it's a UPF and that it's a carcinogen. But I don't know if there's any solid evidence to that. Do you know?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there was talk about some
that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
I think there's that aspartame in there, isn't there?
Exactly.
There's a few other dodgy ones.
Yeah, and then phenylalanine and that sweetener as well. It's there's been some previous stuff about that and its effect on testicular health and things like that. But as Suzy said, some of the long-term evidence just might not even be there. So we don't know. But what we do is you go back to basics, like what Suzy said. So to take your point further, like too much of anything can make you unwell and cause imbalance. Yeah, so you can drink too much water and actually make yourself unwell. Yeah, because you wash out certain salts that your body needs to. So it's about it comes back to that moderation comment that most people will be familiar with. So it's not about being perfect. It's not about having this insta diet and having water from an unicorn's tears or whatever. It's about balance across the board and consistency. Because the effects that it has. So yeah, have a Coke. Have a full fat Coke every now and then. But yeah, don't drink 14 in a day, and certainly don't drink 14 in the space of 1 hour, because you'll not feel good. So because it's putting a lot. The things like you would talk about, the stuff that's in that. The artificial stuff is obviously artificial. It's not really, the body's not really meant to have it, but the body can deal with it. It can flush it out through the kidneys. Yeah. But if you overload the kidneys with it too much of anything, then you will know about it. So
when you say the body can flush it out, is that like if you have anything of these sort of substances, and this would apply to our conversation later as well, but if you have a substance like, let's call it a Coke Zero, let's focus on the soft drink thing. You said like about the body flushing out. Is that a prescribed amount? Like, let's say you had 1 can of Coke Zero, right? You didn't drink 14 in an hour. You just drank 1, maybe 2, whatever it was, a bottle or a can. And you add it with food or something. How long does the body actually have a time scale where it says, okay, this is what I need to flush this out, or is it like?
It's more complicated than that. So everybody's different for a start. It depends on your size, your genetics, your weight, your body mass index, all of that. And then the meal thing is a funny one, because it's always talked about with alcohol, isn't it? Like you won't get as drunk if you drink when you're eating a meal. Not true. I mean, you're still going to get the same amount of alcohol that's absorbed into your bloodstream. It's just going to do so slightly slower because there's food in your digestive tract as well. But if you drink 3 beers really quickly, or you drink 3 beers over 3 hours, the same amount of alcohol is still going into your system. It's just the speed at which it hits it. And your kidneys and your liver can only cope with substances at a certain rate. So that's the thing that varies from person to person.
Okay.
Some people have better enzymes than others and better genetics, or they're bigger, so they can cope with more dose. Same way, if we dose people for paracetamol, you don't give a 3-month-old child and a 30-year-old obese man the same amount of paracetamol.
Sure.
So think of it in a similar way. The problem is no one really knows what the safe dose is for a lot of these substances, which I would call our blurred lines.
Yeah.
So we have a full section on substances and addictions, and we talk about the big ones, obviously, alcohol, opiates, blah, blah, blah. But we also have a section called substances and blurred lines, where we talk about things that are socially acceptable but could still be problematic.
Like Diet Coke.
Like sugar and soft drinks and caffeine drinks
and the other stuff like performance enhancing stuff.
I'm beginning to like you guys less and less as this conversation goes on.
But the point is, right, it is about balance. Everything you said there, there's very few things in life that we definitely can't do, but it's about moderating them. That's
sure. Can I do a few more teacher well-being style questions, which I think would be interesting to our teacher viewers? So the second one is, obviously teachers find it difficult to stay healthy because of the lifestyles they lead. I'm sure like GPs as well. So I do the whole intermittent fasting thing. At the moment, I've been experimenting with it for the last couple of months. I've been doing, how many? I think 14 hours. So I think the normal one would be 8 p.m. to midday. So sometimes I'm doing 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. I wondered if you knew anything about that, whether that's a good thing, whether it really is that great, or whether it's just like one of those TikTok-y things where everyone's like, hey, it's amazing.
It's been going for a while. It's got some reasonable evidence behind it from what I can tell. I mean, obviously the idea is you're eating for less of the time in 24 hours, so therefore overall your calorific intake is less. And I don't know if I'm talking too much. You go on about that.
No, that's okay. And that's a fair
These were quick fire. Don't worry. These were quick fire ones.
Well, there's also an aspect about changing the body's metabolism because of that. So you're stimulating the body to maybe make use of stores that it already has. So to use more of its stores. So to help lose weight. So that's part of it. So there's a volume going in reduction, which Suzy mentioned, and then there's a changing of the body's metabolism to try and stimulate it to use more of its stores. So therefore lose weight or use its own your stored calorific content. So there's aspects of that to play into it, but there's also the practical aspects that are associated with it. So you mentioned this is about teachers and their day-to-day. You want to be on it like any professional. When you get up in the day, you want to be able to face your day in the best possible optimal state. Yeah. So if you're going to fast and you're going to fast during that day, you're not eating all night, then your blood sugar is going to be low. And if you're used to it and you take these sort of dietary approaches take time to get used to, then your body will manage and cope to it. But if you just started it and you're always having to adjust, it's now you've suddenly changed and you've taken away when it's expecting calories. It will complain at you, and it will give you a headache. You'll be fatigued. You'll get irritable. You'll feel hungry. Your focus will drop. And so all these things coming with low blood sugar because it's expecting it, it's wanting it, and then it will take time to switch over and use its stores. So a tricky, difficult thing, and people will go through that when they're trying to go into these diets and adjusting to them in different ways. So for me, the common one they talk about is how we were all originally designed. Eating little and often, is the idea about, but sometimes you might go for a long period without eating and have to rely on your stores. But the little and often concept means that you don't fire a big meal into you, and it takes a while for your body to say, okay, I've had enough. But it's too late if you've already eaten it all in the space of 10 minutes. So taking little and often then allows you to be more, we call it intuitive eating. So listening to your body, thinking about when you're hungry, and then eating something appropriate. And then obviously going back to balance, that's not eating a little bite of my Mars bar every 10 minutes. It's about having that balanced diet. Going into school, you might have varying resources there. You might have a good canteen. You might have to take your own food. You have to prep that the night before. So there's all the practical stuff that come with it.
Which is hard to do intuitive eating with unless you're in a really good routine with food, isn't it? Because you can't be like, oh, actually now I'm quite hungry for some whatever, but I don't have them with me.
Do you know what? While we're talking about the whole health and sort of eating and fasting and general wellness, I know this features quite a bit in Peach Wellness Academy in terms of sort of wellness culture. But I wanted to ask you, particularly when it comes to young people, has sort of the rise of like the online wellness culture stuff, has it sort of harmed young people's body image and mental health, or has it been a more generally positive thing? And is there anything you include with Peach Wellness that sort of tackles that a little bit in terms of what, because from my, just before you answer that, because it's important, from my observation, I was teaching near Manchester, before I took the move to this school I'm in now. And I noticed in that school that there was a lot more teenage boys who were obviously going to the gym a lot, right? And that had become an on-trend influencer thing. Now, when I sort of reflected on that, discussed it with other people, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's generally not a bad thing. It's probably a positive thing. But the bits we discussed was whether that became an addiction, because I know that's part of some of the stuff you cover as well. So there was that element of, is that wellness culture actually addictive for young people? What does all this mean?
Sure, brilliant question.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we address it several times throughout the PWE program, but it's also kind of woven through in this balance theme. I mean, it's extreme for some people. Obviously, it's good if you're not going to be active at all and you get into fitness and you're careful with it and you're balanced. Yeah, brilliant. But there are people who take it to extremes, and it's the opinion of a lot of people now that online wellness culture essentially is the new diet culture. It's just wrapped up differently.
Sure.
And I think obviously the algorithm plays into this here. If you're on social media and you're seeing a lot of very fit bodies with very low percent body fat, that becomes the norm for you. You strive for that. And we know that there is a significant increase in eating disorders, but also body dysmorphia. And sometimes they're the same. Someone can have both, but sometimes not. So yes, for the first time ever, I mean, eating disorders were always very high in young females, but that's worsening. But we are seeing a lot of body dysmorphia in young males from.
Do you think that's increased? Do you think that's increased?
I think so, and I think probably a lot of it is not really diagnosed because it's one of the more acceptable things. But essentially, when you become addicted to anything, if that thing becomes the most important thing in your life to the detriment of other things, that's an addiction. So if you're neglecting other aspects of your life for that, then there's a problem there and you've lost balance. And
but would body dysmorphia though, or like even just what we're discussing now, would that show up in that way though as an addiction?
Yeah, well, there's like you see, and
you could argue yes and no.
Yeah, so there's two aspects to that, which you want to go into this in depth. It's quite complex, but so there's the sort of most common bit you think about eating disorders. The physical impact of exercising too much and not eating correctly. The balance not being correct. They're either doing too much and not replacing or not matching, or eating the wrong things, etc. So that has a physical impact. Losing weight and developing an eating disorder, where your body weight goes so low that actually begins to have affect you neurologically, which it becomes a medical condition, diagnosable medical condition. But there's also the sort of subclinical, as Suzy mentioned, aspect to this. So this pervasive cultural, and trend, development, which is, do this. Someone puts out a good idea, some beautiful influencer puts out an idea that carbohydrates are bad, don't eat them, just eat protein. And it's like, it's a ridiculous notion, but people take that on, and then come to harm for that. I've heard a similar story, like you mentioned, a boys rugby group quite locally. They're just cutting out carbs, and then expecting to go in and perform a high level in rugby without any energy, and no stores, it's just going to be miserable, and you're going to feel awful, and you're not at that key stage in your life when the rate of growth is huge. You need all the right things. You need more of all of the right things. If you're cutting something out, you're potentially going to impact on your development, your organic development. We don't stop growing, and the bones in our body don't stop growing until at least 18. But developmentally, our brain goes on to 25, isn't it? So so there's that bit. But there's also the behavioural bit we just talked about there. So you're going and doing this. Suzy mentioned this. So you might still be making up with your nutritional needs, but you're going into the gym all the time. You're spending hours in there, and to the detriment of, say, having friendly, liaisons, or going to see your friends, or doing downtown reading books, whatever. It's a bit like gaming to the extreme, hiding away in your room. You're doing something so much that you're neglecting other areas of your life, and you might.
I think the difference. Sorry to cut in there. I was just going to say the difference between that is I think the gaming thing was happening when I was a kid. The gaming thing was like a 90s thing. I mean, I played loads of games. I wasn't addicted, but I played N64, Football Manager. I used to, I'd sit there for a whole weekend playing Football Manager. GoldenEye on the N64 4-player would just be, I mean, that was the only other thing I'd say. It was all in, when you played multiplayer, it was all in person. So my mates would come around. It was all in person. It wasn't online because that didn't exist. It was literally in the, you take over the living room. Your parents would have to go and make dinner somewhere else because you're everywhere playing N64 with 4 players.
Well, so I
tripping over the leads.
If you'll allow me, Tom, I'll tell you. This is the story I give as to part of the reason why we're in this. And Suzy's going to sigh because I like to tell the story because it kind of frames a problem. It's not perfect, but it does frame it. So,
see, before you do that, because you'll remember that story, can I wrap up the wellness thing?
All right, go for it.
Right. What I would say is, it's everywhere in our programme, but we have a dedicated section to nutrition, where again, what we do with PWA is go back to the basics. People are getting really niche information from wellness influencers, cut out carbs or don't eat this or eat this, and it's so confusing that they don't even know where to place that information. So they don't know what a carb is. They don't know how your body digests or metabolizes that. They don't know what a protein is. But they know a little bit of science, but none of the basics. So we fill in those gaps. And the expert that we have to deliver the nutrition content is an influencer on Instagram, but she's a registered nutritionist. I found her, she's young, she's brilliant. She also had an eating disorder in the past. So she quite strongly, she feels strongly about not being too extreme about things and about being balanced and applying the principles and the knowledge that she now has that she wished she had before. And she actually tells her story on the platform, which involves controlling food, but also excessive exercise. She's, I've got a photo of her with her knee cast up because she had an ACL injury in the gym doing pull-ups. It's crazy, because that was normal. So yes, we go there and we address it in a very balanced way.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very relevant point. It's about that foundation knowledge. Not just stovepiped into this very niche bit of science like aspartame is bad, that kind of thing. You don't even know what that is in the context of nutrition. So actually, let's start with the basics, get that right. Then you can build on it. Then you can go more complex later in life if you want to, when you really understand the basis. So the analogy that I was going back to, why I think we're in this situation with where things were before. So I don't know how old you are, but I'm 44, and I was very much in the realms of that. The PlayStation generation, which when consoles really took off, and what I sort of describe is that at that point, the teens and the young people in the household started to go away from the dinner table, because when you were at the dinner table before, you might have had those conversations one-to-ones with parents, with elders, with grandparents, and you're starting to get that distilled wisdom about life, some knowledge, some passed down to you. Then you moved away from the dinner table into your room to play games. Yes, your pals could still come over because it wasn't connected to the internet at that point, so you're still kind of socializing a bit. But then it started to go online, and that was later. They were growing up, and it went online, and you didn't have to have your pals over at your house. Now you're just gaming online and speaking to whoever, and so you're losing that face-to-face, in-person communication skills. Reading people's faces, responding, etc. And you've missed all that wisdom from the dinner table, and so that gap is growing now. And that generation has grown up and had their own kids. So my point is that actually then they're less able to have less of that wisdom to pass on, and that's just something that's going to increase. And I think that's part of the issue. So it's a crude analogy, but that's part of the digital era that we're in. Everything is such a fast pace. We are ill-equipped now to even if we're tech savvy, to understand what our young people are going through, because the pace of change is so great and continues. So it's a big challenge to address these issues. And we in our program, again, we call it digital health. So we start with the basics. What is the terminology of the internet, and what's the device? What is cyber awareness? What is security? What's just basics about password security, and the common thing which we all should use now, multi-factor authentication, to keep ourselves safe, to keep our passwords and our data safe. So we start really basic and then move into these explanations, and then we go on to talk about online behavior, your digital footprint, what information you upload and can be manipulated, exploited, and once it's up there, it's up there, and we move through that into cyberbullying. We talk about how to recognize harmful behavior online and what to do about it. So we go through all of that, and right through to the addictions, gaming, gambling, online, so everything in our program, what we want people to realize and see naturally is that everything's interconnected. So yes, in that cyber health module, you'll see gaming and gambling and aspect, but you'll also see in addictions, and it's not, we're not just our mental health, we're not just our body, we're our social connections, we're all of that, and it's something we use a lot in the sort of holistic medicine world called, that we refer to as called the biopsychosocial model of health, where all these areas overlap and contribute to what makes us who we are. So yeah, really, really important.
And as you're saying about connecting, I think the next bit sort of connects nicely into what you were saying, which is on sleep, which I thought was quite a good segue from the whole wellness thing. I mean, again, hate to make this all about me, but let's do it. Anyway.
I'm enjoying this. Okay.
But so I've mentioned my addiction to Coke Zero / Diet Coke. I never drink full fat Coke, by the way. Part of my addiction is that I'm very specific about, I can't have Pepsi and I can't have full fat Coca-Cola. It has to be the Diet Coke. I don't have Coke Light because Coke Light tastes different to Diet Coke.
Okay.
So I have specifically,
you've got to have some enjoyment.
Specifically Coke Zero or Diet Coke. Diet Coke is not available in the continent, so it has to be Coke Zero.
Probably better because Diet Coke's quite high in caffeine.
Yeah.
Well, possibly, yeah. So anyway, it's not, none of it's good. You told me I was going to die, Suzy, at the start of the show, which was a great start. What I did want to touch on was the sleep thing, because I obviously, living in Spain, they go to bed later anyway, right? There's like kids running around in parks at like midnight. Right? It's mad. But and it's nice, there's no hassle or anything like that. But the culture is very, very different. So probably, I probably am getting sleep-wise maybe 6 to 7 hours, maybe, right? Now, obviously, we know that teenagers naturally tend to stay up later. I know part of your program, you focus on sleep and the young mind and all that sort of stuff. So, I suppose there's a two-part question. Is my 6 to 7 hours sleep bad? Because I've read things about the whole 8-hour sleep thing being a myth. I think that was the BBC covered that fairly recently, saying that's just a myth. And it's obviously I always talk to the kids in school about Thatcher and how she used to do 4 hours sleep a night, and she was at her desk at like 5 a.m. then going to bed at what?
Not healthy, but yeah,
that's insane. I don't have. And also I've talked about at the other end. I always talk about like Churchill, like staying up till like 2 a.m. and sleeping in with like a cocktail and a cigar till like 12 midday the following day or whatever, and people are coming and saying, Winston, we've got a war on here. But equally, I was wondering, so for sleep, what is the story then? How does poor sleep affect learning or mood or emotional regulation?
Let me bring it back to you, Tom.
Please do. Please do. I mean, I couldn't get, it's tough to get a GP appointment, so this is really helpful.
How do you feel? Because we're off doing other stuff now. That's the problem, right? How do you feel on your 6 or 7 hours of sleep?
Do you know what? I feel generally okay. I think sometimes I'm hitting a bit of a wall. Sometimes I'll have a power nap for like maybe half an hour. I mean, sometimes I struggle with that. I'm a person who suffers from anxiety. So if I sometimes I just can't have a power nap because my brain is just full of rubbish, even if I try to. But sometimes I can, and that helps. But generally speaking, not too bad. Certainly 7 hours, I'm more or less okay.
Yeah. I mean, the 8 hours thing, I think you're right, is a myth. Every person needs different amounts of sleep. But it's about, again, coming back to your intuition. How do you actually feel? Do you feel rested in the morning? Do you feel like you've had enough sleep? There's lots of things get thrown about minimum 5, 8's ideal. Women need more than men. But we're all forgetting the fact that we're individuals. And actually, why are we letting devices dictate what we should be doing and how we feel? Why are we not listening to ourselves more? The problem with sleep nowadays is our body was designed for a non-digital world. Our sleep patterns were dictated by light. I mean, light tells our body when to release cortisol at the peak time, when your melatonin needs to increase. We slept more in the winter months as humans in the past than we do than the summer months. But nowadays, everything is 24/7. And we're in front of bright lights and digital devices. These are tricking our hormones and tricking our brains into being alert at the wrong time.
Sure.
So our circadian rhythm and the nice pattern, which should be a peak of cortisol in the morning that tapers down at night time, makes you feel sleepy. And then the opposite with your melatonin rise at night time. These are affected by light. They're also affected by stress. They're also affected by overstimulation. So it's very difficult as humans to tune into our natural circadian rhythms. It's why, if someone goes away on a camping trip in nature and they're like, oh, yeah, I was sleeping on the floor and it was uncomfortable, but I had the best sleep. And then they wake up refreshed because they're waking up naturally with the light. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it gives you a little bit of the science of sleep.
Yeah.
And actually, the point is we need to just pay more attention to our bodies and try and reduce the unnatural world and bring in more natural stuff.
Funnily enough, though, I have noticed probably over the years, I mean, I'm coming up to my 20th year of teaching now. Probably over the years, I have noticed more teenagers being exhausted in lessons. Probably I've noticed that more. Even even this term, I've probably, and actually the kids will be pretty honest and say, I'm exhausted because I was up till whatever, playing whatever it was, or on TikTok or whatever, scrolling through.
So I mean, I'll take that point on it. It's what Suzy said a bit further, which is, the element, and you're kind of alluding to it, what you're talking about is sleep hygiene, we call it. So that's about how you approach sleep, in your day to day. And this is relevant to teenagers as well as adults, to anybody and everybody, because of what you said, the digital age now we're in, and screens, as you mentioned, blue light everywhere. We can't get away from it. It's not going away. If you are fortunate enough to do a job or work where you don't have to be on screens, then you can have better discipline, but you can, if you can't avoid it because it's part of your life, and that, as a teenager, you will be glued to your phone because socially it is part of your life. You have to be on these systems, you have to be present, communicating. It's about that understanding, well, what it's doing to you, and then making a different decision. So it's what we teach, but to get into healthier habits, all right? So we talked before about routine in your diet, routine in exercise. Routine helps because it gets us, when things are crazy and all over the place, if we've got a routine, it's familiar, we kind of more naturally, once we get into it, we'll follow it, and we'll miss it when we don't. So getting healthy habits on the go is a big aspect to this. And when we talk about sleep, a routine, we talk about bedtime routine. What's a bedtime routine? So one of the biggest issues with screens is still being on it, lying there in your bed, and before you switch off, it's the last thing you do is click off your phone.
I'm terrible at this. That's my worst. I'm terrible.
Yeah, and we're all guilty of it. We use, the problem is a lot of the time for professionals, we use our phone as our alarm. So it's like it's never more than an arm's reach away from us.
Yeah.
So a techniques implement, things you can do is be more disciplined about yourself. Set yourself a time limit and say, I am not going to get on my phone. At least an hour before bed. I'm going to read. I'm going to get into my, my sleep routine. I want to be asleep for 10, 11 o'clock, whatever, right? So therefore, I want to be in bed with a book that's not blue light, and read a book, because that will help you, focus on that and let your mind, calm down. The blue light directly, as Suzy said, inhibits melatonin. So the more you're on it, the more that melatonin is getting suppressed, and therefore you're still alert. You're not ready to sleep.
So even when you're exhausted, you're wired because your body's not hormonally ready to switch off.
Yeah, but your body's tired. It wants to sleep, but your brain is firing away. It's very active. It's red hot. If you hold a heat lamp at it, it's firing much more. So getting into that routine again, it's about that process, because that trains your body. It's a bit Pavlovian's dog. You train your body as well to say, okay, calm down now. I'm going to allow it. So there's the physical, supporting of melatonin, but there's also that habitual, stimulation. Brain, the body is a creature of the mind. If you get into that routine, your body will follow suit and sort of say, like, I'm ready for bed. I'm going to read, because then within the hour, I'm going to feel sleepy and I'm going to turn over and go to sleep. Get yourself a different alarm clock. Get one of the good old analogs, or maybe digital, whatever, but get one that's all it does. And you set that so you put your phone away more than arm's reach. You're not going to easily reach to it and get it to check the time.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a message. I better just look at that. Oh, that's how it happens. It runs away with itself. So make a physical barrier, an intervention that stops you from doing that. You might still want it in your room because you want to, in case there's an emergency or situations going on, you need to be contactable. Fine. But make it more difficult for you to just pick it up, look at it, and then, as you say, get into a discipline of putting it down before you go to bed. So these are all just steps that you can implement that are not difficult. They require a bit of discipline. They require a bit of positive, intention and and practice. But when you get into a habit, they say, isn't it, around sort of 2 to 3 weeks of doing something, it's more likely you'll be able to maintain
But
it.
I think with the sleep thing, like, if you've had that problem for a long time, it doesn't fix itself overnight because your hormones are still all over the place. So it does take sometimes a month or so to just get those hormones to regulate. And there's other small things you can do, like making sure your environment is dark before you go to bed. Your bedroom's really dark. You're in a dim lighting, and in the morning, expose yourself to natural light, even if it's cloudy. Natural light in the morning is what helps your cortisol peak at the right time. So there's all these tips, and these things we tailor for young people because you're right, their body clock's different. They're meant to stay up later and sleep later. But the point with teens is you can't just say don't scroll on your phone in bed because they don't care. But if you tell them all the science behind it and you show them the graphs, you show them what happens when they use blue light too late at night, then they're more likely to make a better decision because it's an informed choice.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure. No,
I know what this is like because I can sleep for Britain. Honestly, what am I like? I'm like the world's best sleeper. But my sleep right now is horrendous because we're launching in 5 days. So every evening, the kids go to their beds, it's 7:30, and then we're on the devices because you can't get me around them. We're doing evening work, and my sleep is, even though I'm exhausted, I can't get to sleep, and it's shockingly bad, and that is why. Probably a bit of strength as well.
Yeah, so it's an approach to it, because then what we're talking about then is what does that lead to as well for you? There's other aspects about diet and stress and other life activities, the quality of your sleep. So let's say 4 hours of quality good sleep, uninterrupted, getting into deep REM sleep is better than say 6 hours of crap sleep where you're.
Is it better? Is that better?
Absolutely. You want to get into those deep cycles.
That's when your body actually repairs and rests properly.
Neurologically as well, and it allows at that time to do all that proper sort of sorting of information, long-term memories, etc.
The other thing that sleep does, long-term memories, sorting of information, but also emotional regulation. So that's why you feel on edge and unable to cope, and yet therefore unable to learn. It's everything that sleep does. Systemically helps your immune system, helps all the cells rest, but everything it does with the brain is mainly around the prefrontal cortex, a bit at the front, which deals with emotional regulation, higher cognitive function, learning and processing of memories, which is the hippocampus, which is the main part of the brain that's involved with learning and teaching. So if that's not repairing itself, it's not storing the memories, i.e. the learning, so kids won't be as alert in class, but they won't be able to recall what they learned the day before either.
Do you know what? I posted something interesting on my socials a few months ago around, now this is completely taking teacher well-being or teacher sort of life out of the picture for a minute, which we rarely do on Teachers Talk Radio, but let's just imagine we were for a minute and we were purely thinking about the children and only thinking about them. Would it therefore be better to start the school day at 10 or 11 a.m. and then take it through to 5 in an ideal world if we're just purely talking about the patterns and sleep and all that? Or is it, and this was a question for you as well, is it actually worse when you go to bed at, you talk about the time you have to sleep. So like if I go to bed at 2 a.m. and I wake up at 9 a.m., I've had 7 hours sleep, but I feel more tired.
Yeah. So that'll be your hormones that are doing that. But so generally speaking, they always say sleep before midnight is better. You get into a deeper sleep easier, and it's because of the peak of cortisol should be around 10 or 11 a.m. So at that time of night, it's going to be at its absolute lowest to get you to sleep into steady sleep. So the beginning of the night, you have longer deep sleep, more REM sleep, and then as the morning comes about, it lightens and you get more periods of light sleep. That's why you often wake a little bit more in the morning times. You have more vivid dreams, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So obviously, if your normal pattern is going to bed at 10 p.m. every night and waking up at 6, for talking's sake, so you get, what's that, 8 hours. But then one night you stay up till 2 and you sleep till 10, you will be more tired because your sleep quality won't be as good and you won't have had as many cycles or time within the deep stages. So it's basics again. It's about how do you train your body and train your hormones to be in the same rhythm and the same time. It's why they say that, even at weekends, you should try roughly to stay to the same sleep cycle so you're not giving you're not confusing your hormones too much for the week to come. For teens, though, we know that they're everything shifts to the right. So basically, their cortisol peaks later in the day and their melatonin peaks later in the day. That's been the case for as long as we know, as long as sleep research has been going on. I personally think it would be better if kids started a bit later at school and stayed on a bit later. I think they're probably more likely to be alert.
Yeah.
The problem now is, would they actually just stay up another 2 hours on their devices anyway? And actually, is that going to make any difference to their hormones? I don't know.
No, Suzy mentioned that. It's about that routine, that helps the situation mentally, but also physically from a hormonal reaction, because it's expecting. What's the body expecting? And if you change that routine, it's expecting something else, and that's when the sleep quality, even if you're getting the hours, might not be so good. And also, when you get to sleep, it's about staying asleep. That allows you to go into the deeper REM states. It varies in terms of what people's REM stage is, but it's can be from 15 minutes to a bit longer. But going down and then coming up, it's sort of cyclical like that. So the longer you can stay asleep, the more likely you are to get deeper and longer in REM sleep. So again, that's that quality of sleep. But getting to sleep, there's no point if you're wired going to bed at 10 and then just lying there and then you get distracted and you're not ready. You need to have done the work beforehand, or the preventative stuff beforehand to get ready and say, and then if you're changing your routine, you need to stick at that.
There's a lot of kids will play games late, and games. I mean, I'm terrible at this as well. Sometimes if I play a game late and then try to go to sleep, I can't go to sleep because my brain's absolutely wired. It's thinking about the game. It's
also wired for fight or flight a bit, isn't it?
I've got a massive game coming up against,
Yep.
Against Everton coming up. And it's make or break for Champions League, and all I'm thinking about is the tactics for that game. And I will literally sit there for like an hour in bed thinking about the tactics for this game. To be fair, I had to stop playing Football Manager for this very reason. But honestly, because I was like, I've actually got a job to do tomorrow. I cannot be thinking about tactics in a game which will go down in the annals of nothingness forever.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, listen, I've got a best friend who it was Warhammer. Was it Warhammer? The computer game.
Yeah.
When it was coming out and all the different levels were being released, and he'd plan ahead. And he works for the police. He would take 2 days leave for the release of this new level, and he would literally play it though like 48 hours. A little bit of sleep. He was an insomniac anyway. Self-proclaimed, but wonder why. And he would do that just to because he was addicted to the dopamine hit of playing this game. And it's an addiction. It's the same process. It's the same issue, and it was to the detriment of all other aspects of his life. Although he did support himself professionally by taking leave to do it, how well was he going to be going back to being a police officer immediately after that? He would feel terrible.
He might have learned some new tactics.
He might have learned some new tactics. I don't know. And you can argue about socializing with people online, but it's not quality relationships. It's not face to face, having laughs, talking stuff. So back to that imbalance thing, isn't it? The themes are obvious. They keep coming back in, and I think that's a really important aspect we teach the program is what we want to come through, because the world is complex. It seems on the surface getting more complex, but actually we are still simple beings in the sense of our needs. So if we can listen and start to look inwards a bit rather than being completely on receive all the time, then we can start to say, right, what do I need? Rather than what I think I should be doing or should have, or what I should think I should believe. Well, actually start listening to my body and my brain and my thoughts and my feelings, and then make different decisions, in all aspects, whether that's just about your health and maintenance or about what you do, or what relationships you have. So, that's a really important point.
It's a funny one that I see in clinic all the time, like the sleep thing, I can't sleep, or I'm waking up every day at 3 a.m. That's a really, really common one. And then you say, okay, well, let's talk about your lifestyle, and people get really annoyed actually because they're like, what's that got to do with it? I'm like, well, you just told me that you have like 5 Diet Cokes in an evening. Of course that's going to have something to do with it, but people are very defensive about how their lifestyle could be actually affecting their physical health. And it's like, that is the basics of health though. Of course it's going to be affecting you. And the 3 a.m. sleep thing is classic for a cortisol problem. So if you are suffering with anxiety or depression, classically, you will wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes 1 or sometimes 4 or whatever. But people tend to wake, early morning waking is
and then not be able to get back to sleep.
Really struggle to get back to sleep. Yeah, that's them for the day because they've had a cortisol peak at the wrong time, and then it's crept back up at night time at that time in the morning.
But is that because they've gone to bed early, or just because the cortisol?
No, just because they're stressed or they're low.
Yeah.
And so their body is reacting to
that.
If
you're anxious about something's going on in your life, or you're stimulating, my body being a creature that you're stimulating the body to produce more of those awake, fight or flight hormones, and the cortisol that's naturally been twisted by your different disruptive patterns. So it's like that cocktail of things that contribute to this the situation that feeds itself, and that
which makes sense because if we were under threat physically, you don't want to be sleeping for 12 hours in a deep sleep. So
so you sleep light, not as good, and wake up, and then you start thinking about the thing because you're awake, because it's dominant, it's front and center of your mind. It was the last thing you thought about before you went to sleep, and then it pops into your head again. So there's these all. It's not just one thing; it's all these things that contribute, and part of that. Within the program is teaching people to look at all these areas. Don't ignore them because they all play a part and they are all linked. So, and when you can make small changes in all these different areas, that turns into a big difference. It turns into something, that materially you really notice and you feel. And then when you get that feedback that actually, I did this and this and that helped and I felt better, you've got your own confirmation. It's not somebody else. Actually, I did something and I feel the benefits. I see the change. Okay, I'm going to do more, and that's that positive interaction and then affirmation, confirmation, and then, okay, what else can I do? So
is there something sleep specific on Peach Wellness Academy?
Yeah.
There's a whole module.
There's a whole module on sleep, but there's also sleep.
I want to do it now. Being honest.
I mean, it's talked a lot about if you're stressed at school, which I guess would be relevant for teachers.
You could be stressed at school as a teacher, also as a student.
I think a lot of the issue too. Wayne, we've got another doctor. There's too many doctors here. Dr. Wayne's commented, all teachers should be informed about sleep hygiene by HR when they are onboarding at their schools, colleges, or unis. Brilliant advice. Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Wayne Reed, for tuning in, joining us. Much appreciated. We're nearly up to 300 live viewers. So thank you for tuning in. And obviously, if you're watching this back, then thank you as well for being here or listening to us as a podcast. I wanted to move on a little bit to an issue that I think we were sort of discussing this pre-show a little bit. I think it's an issue that is getting worse, but I'll let you correct me on that because you guys are the experts. But genital health, pornography, maybe pornography addiction or the issues because of it, right? How do you think porn has shaped young people's minds and is shaping young people's minds and is changing the way they think about life?
So, are you okay? Can we take this unless you're doing great ideas?
I'll follow on.
Okay. A lot of young people are exposed to porn before they have any personal sexual experience now. And it's because it's so accessible. Even with the change and rules and laws recently, it's still very, very accessible. And porn is a distorted view on normal sexual practice. The majority of porn is quite extreme, and they can escalate. So the addiction thing comes in here. When you have an addiction to anything, you build a tolerance. You start to need more of the thing to get the same hit. And that happens with porn. And often it's either more frequent porn use or it's more extreme content. So people can escalate to quite extreme sexual practices very quickly. And then, if that's all they're accessing, they kind of think that that's normal. and might expect that of a sexual partner. So the big thing in the sexual health community just now is that a lot of young people's first sexual experience is actually with anal sex rather than anything else, because it's safe, you won't fall pregnant, and it's what's expected, it's what's done in pornography. And there's a lot of problems coming about from that, physical problems. So we do cover this. We cover it with a sexual health consultant, obviously, and she is one of the lead consultants in Scotland and has a lot of experience in genital urinary health in general. And is quite concerned about this. And it was difficult to film with her because it wasn't difficult with her, it was just difficult in general, because you think, who's going to be using this product, and actually, can we go there? Can we talk about these things? They're not comfortable subjects to talk about. I would have been completely fine, by the way, Tom, talking about this 15 minutes ago if you hadn't told me that 300 people are listening. You're getting a bit like, oh God, what am I saying?
No, don't worry about that.
So basically, it's really, really difficult. And the problem we have is there's not much to counteract that. And that's why we have to talk about these things. Because if their only experience and their only education is through pornography, then that's really not good enough. So we need to meet them where they are. We need to talk about the issues that they're really experiencing. And and
I think it's so important what Suzy mentioned about that sexual experience. You're as a youngster, you're discovering adulthood, and who you are and what your preferences are, and if you've not had any sexual experiences, and if that's the first thing you see, you think, well, okay, I've got to try and emulate that. And that's not just, Suzy mentioned about the behaviors about sexual intercourse as an example, but let's also talk about the other aspect of pornography, which is body image, genitalia in general. You look at pornography, it shows a very distorted and unrealistic view of what genitalia actually look like, both female and male, or those born as female or those born as male. Even just the whole practice of the sexual acts that are going on there, the environments that they're in, it's all completely distorted and unrealistic. It's not real. Porn is not a real life situation. It's a contrived, mechanism to play into that sort of preference or desire or that somebody might have. And as Suzy said, it can get really extreme. So if you've got your own genitalia that you're considering, you're wondering, is normal? It's normal to consider, am I normal? What, my body, my shape, and then you're comparing that against pornography. It's going to be different, and that's going to lead to unnecessary anxiety or concern.
Do you think teenagers though do that anyway, regardless of porn?
I don't know. I mean, I've obviously been a GP for just 10-ish years. If I'd been around for 40 years, I might be able to say what's the comparison here. Personally, what I do know is that a lot of my appointments with young people are to ask me to look at their genitalia to tell them if it's normal. And again, I get most of that from females, and I think that's because I'm female. But that's actually one of the things that started me off thinking about the idea for PWA, because this was an almost daily occurrence, and I started to think, why does everyone think that they're abnormal? Why is everyone so obsessed with this?
When they said normal, or what did they sort of explain what that meant, or did they literally just say, "Is this normal?"
No specifics. So people tended to come in just quite shy and just, I'm worried about something and I don't know if it's normal. And then I say, is there something in particular you're worried about? Or is there a particular part of your anatomy you don't think is normal? And it was just, no, I just don't know if it's normal. Can you have a look? And that was it. And it could be that, with pornography, if you want me to go into the nitty gritty with it, obviously with the vulva, on pornography, it's normally trimmed back. People have had surgical procedures. There's bleaching going on. Everything's very symmetrical and small. That's not the reality in the world. Most people are asymmetrical, and people can have quite large labia minora, and people are not exposed to that side of things, so they think that it's abnormal. And we've gone there in the programme as well. So we have a whole section addressed to this, and we've used the artwork of an English artist called Jamie McCartney. He plaster casted was it 500 women? It was
think
a
so,
lot of
500.
women. Anyway,
Yeah.
plasticasted all their vulvas and put them on a
Yeah.
wall and called it the Great Wall of Vagina.
Okay.
And then a lot of medical people were like, you can't call it that because it's not internal genitalia. So it's now called the Great Wall of Vulva. And it's
Okay.
a really good resource that a lot of GPs and sexual health doctors use.
Yeah.
And like frequently, in that consultation, I'll then examine a young person, get them to sit down, and I'll bring it up on the computer and I'll show them all the normal, because it just helps them feel better.
Yeah.
And it's not pornographic.
Yeah.
It's just really natty.
Yeah.
So it's okay to use in that respect.
Yeah.
He did go on to do castings of penises as well, didn't he?
Yeah. And that's both penises that are just in a normal state and also erect. So again,
Yeah.
showing the variety, showing the difference, and it's, these are traditionally taboo subjects, that people are very uncomfortable talking about, especially, in our British culture, which is, obviously what we speak from our experience. Other cultures less so, it's normal to talk about sex from a young age and early age.
Yeah.
So part of that is our culture and where we've come from. And then they were just twisted and distorted by this access to this, distorted, disproportionate information and pornography. So it's no wonder that people are so confused and left feeling, am I abnormal? Am I different? When in fact, variety is what's normal, and and it's not. And pornography is not normal. It's not a variation of normal. It has been curated. It has been brought about either surgically or a lot of cosmetic activity and aesthetics to make it look that way, because it's about pleasing to the eye, or what they think is pleasing to the eye. And we know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's about celebrating difference and variety and saying this is normal. And if you again start from that foundation, it's one less worry to worry about. I've got normal genitalia. Yeah, I don't have to worry about that in school. I can go worry about all the other things. And if we can just give the right information to people at the earliest stage, that they can absorb it. And that's a big aspect of why we went there. We know that if we don't, and we don't give them the right information, they're going to go online, they're going to find it. So we from my early point said, no, we need to be able to give this to the youngest, most appropriate age, that they can understand and comprehend it, because they're going to start getting stuff anyway.
They're accessible anyway. We regularly see young people in with sexual health problems or wanting contraception that are very, very young, and they don't have the proper information because it's not yet been
Is
given.
that age getting younger, or is it sort of...
Well, again, haven't practiced for long enough to say, but certainly from 12, 13, 14, you sometimes have to make a call and a decision on that. And what you don't want is they're with a family or in an institution where these things don't get spoken about until you're 16, 17 or 18.
Sure.
Then you think, well, it's too late. And, if they're going to make decisions, they're going to make them. So they might as well make better decisions by being better informed. The other thing with pornography, as you were chatting there, that popped into my head was the consent issue. Obviously a lot of the situations and the role play situations in pornography are basically verging on sexual abuse. So again, teaching young people, especially young boys, that that's normal is, I think, quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think you talked about is this problem getting worse? Well, in my practice as an occupational health doctor, although I've been practicing same time, I see an older group of the demographic. So I see apprentices as young as 16, and then everything after that in the professional age population. And I see people coming to me, and they're not just young, but in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, still with, skewed ideas about their bodies, about health, that have just, that despite all this information age we're in, those ideas that were probably acquired or ingrained young still pervade. They still have those myths, those urban myths passed down by somebody about something. And we've all had silly stories told to us, and we remember and recount them. And some of them probably not for the show, but it just demonstrates that these can persist into their adult life and therefore affect people's lives, and affect their quality of life because of erroneous information, simply wrong or twisted or distorted or out of context information. So it touches on everything. We could talk about this in any aspect of health, where the internet, the access to information is good points. Don't get me wrong. I'm not demonizing it. It's definitely not. It's a good thing. It's helped us to be more efficient. But there's so much out there that the young teenager, who is trying to develop their own identity and opinions, it's just even more difficult because it's just so much and what's right, what's wrong, what's fact, what's incorrect, and that's the difference between disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation is deliberate. It's just somebody's got their own agenda that they're trying to put deliberately incorrect information in. Whereas misinformation, you can have a lot of people who think and genuinely believe that what they're saying is correct, but it might not be, or they've got one fact but they're using it in a completely incorrect way or out of context, and it's still confusing. We mentioned that niche ideas about science straight into the one concept without considering the basics. So it's a really, I don't envy being a teenager. We've got young kids, our kids are 3 and 5, just started school this year, our oldest boy. And, the world that they're going to inherit is going to look even more different than what it is now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my gut feeling says it's harder and it's more challenging and it's more complex. But then again, probably every generation since about 1900 has probably said the same thing. I mean, you think about like the guys who my sort of grandmother's generation, sort of the post World War II, sort of I don't know, the nuclear age, all these different things where people have probably thought the world's going to hell. And it might have been in a way, but it wasn't relative to other times in the past. So it may be changing, but then on the flip side, it does feel different. Definitely to my generation. I'm 40, so I feel as though it definitely is. I think different from if you were to speak to someone probably from, again, I can't speak for these people, but probably from like, I don't know, from sort of from the 50s all the way through to say the year 2010, that 60-year period, 1960, let's say, to 2010, maybe 2005, 2010, you feel as though like that era, yes, there were changes, but the changes we're seeing now are way more dramatic. It's stuff that's way more invasive into people's lives. Right?
I think that's the thing. Like when you, as a young person, when we were all growing up, even if you were bullied at school, for example, it stayed at school. But if you have social media, you have a phone, it's following you home, it's in your safe place. You're consuming information at a time when your guard is down, be it bullying or just misinformation online. It's very hard to find your own truths and your own opinions through all of this. And we've heavily involved teachers in the development of everything we've done.
Yeah.
And the message that keeps coming through here is that I've heard a lot of teachers say, young people, they're just not resilient these days. They're just not resilient enough. And I get it. Like I also thought the same, to be honest. But I've changed my opinion on that. And my opinion is that they are living in a very different world and they have to be very resilient in a different way. So yeah, we would be out in the streets dodging the odd car. We'd be better at playing Kirby. We'd have a bit of a rough and a tumble. Somebody wouldn't have been fed that day by their family, whatever it was. But now the life that they lead is so different. They're constantly comparing themselves to everyone, which is of course completely normal for humans and even more so for teenagers. But our brains were only made to compare ourselves to a handful of people in our lives. They weren't made to instantly have access and compare ourselves to millions of people online. We didn't have access to the same amount of bad news that we have these days. I'm not saying it wasn't going on, and I'm not saying that being ignorant is a good thing. Yeah. But young people are having to filter a lot more internally. And I also think the more devices they have, the less true time they have for physical socializing and interaction, developing those key skills that are really, really important to make you who you are when you have a developing brain. And a device is taking over their prefrontal cortex and affecting the way that the brain actually develops and works. So I don't think that they're less resilient. I think they're resilient in a different way, which perhaps means that they're ill-equipped for some aspects of adult life. But I don't think we should try and point the finger of blame and say that, it's an issue with their generation or whatever. Just trust them more, give them more information, let them make those decisions, let them make their own mistakes more. We've never spoken about this tonight, Tom, but the way that we structure the Peach Wellness Academy program is in 3 themes or triads of themes. Yeah. The first is conversations with your body. The second is conversations with yourself. And the third is conversations with the world. So conversations with the body is, the interesting bits, the genitalia, sexual health, consent, nutrition, whatever. The world is substances and addictions, cyber health, money. We can go into financial literacy, relationships, unhealthy relationships, abuse and violence. Conversations with yourself. When we've spoken to some schools before, they've said, oh yeah, this is the mental health bit. And I'm like, no, it's not, because it's about building mental wellness and being more resilient. So we have 19 individual sections in there. Each one could be several lessons in a classroom, and they are all about understanding and enhancing your mental health. We've completely moved away from trying to focus on problems and diagnoses and things that is too far gone. We've gone right back to basics. What are your thoughts? What does your brain do? How do you process emotion? How are your thoughts linked to your behaviours and your actions? We take them back to that stuff. There's a whole section there on resilience, for example, how you can better and improve your resilience with accompanying activity sheets. So the focus is really, really on.
Can you improve resilience by being taught resilience? Do you think that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you can sort of teach resilience in its sense. It's like that sort of back to the reactive stuff. I think
you can teach them what resilience is.
You can teach them what resilience is. Yeah, absolutely. And that's all those different bits. You know, we talked before about making these changes and attending to these different aspects of your life will naturally allow you to develop a level of personal resilience. So through knowledge and understanding, you get wisdom. You know, you are able to then make different decisions. You're able to perceive and understand the world around you, and therefore change the way you feel about it, or react in a different way. So it's about getting in front of these problems before you've lost it, before it's eroded your resilience. It's about what can you do to build it in the first place and maintain it. And so it's not about teaching resilience. It's about teaching the aspects that make up resilience, what make up personal resilience. And that is through empowering and enabling young people. It's not telling them this is how you should live. We don't do any of that in the program. We're very strong on not doing that. We're not telling them authoritatively saying this is what you need to do. We're giving them the facts. We're telling where the science has something and when the science doesn't know it. We're saying these are what the things you need to consider about this subject or this topic, and before you make your decisions. And you still got to make your decisions, and you've still got to learn. And you will make mistakes, and that's part of being human. That is what we all do. We've got to do that. But if we can start from that factual, robust, and reliable start point, then you're going to be able to build on that instead of going down rabbit holes of misinformation and getting yourself twisted in knots and confused and in trouble.
Yeah, it's an interesting link in here, but the sort of this idea of normal emotions versus diagnosis, which I think has become a really key issue in schools, actually. I think that a lot of schools in maybe a well-meaning way are sort of going down the road of this person is suffering from, anxiety, depression, whatever, when, again, I hate to be that person who's like, when I was 15, but it is relevant in this conversation. When I was a teenager, all right, there was many times when I felt sad, sort of maybe a bit lonely, maybe a bit anxious, maybe a bit, oh my God, I just really don't want to do this. I'm hating today, whatever those feelings are. Usually they would pass, right? But they were there, like 100%, fairly often. But the way I sort of look back on that is I think back then, for right or wrong, that was seen as part of life. Yeah. Certainly by it just wouldn't have been a thing to have sort of gone to a teacher and said, I'm suffering from anxiety, right? Or I'm feeling. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but I also worry that we pathologize sort of things as well. So I wondered, what's your take on that? Should we be focusing more on clinical diagnosis, or should we be going, no, actually, let's go the other way and let's try and address everything?
Yeah, well, that's what we've done. We've gone the other way.
Mhm.
So no,
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is a common, really common, several times a day consultation, I would say, with me,
Yeah.
is I have anxiety or I have depression or whatever it may be. And it's really difficult to unpick that with a young person, because by the time they've got to me, they've convinced themselves there's a problem. They may or may not have spoken to other people about it, definitely have checked it out on social media. Social media has probably played into that with the algorithm. So more things, if you do this thing, you must have anxiety. This is what anxiety looks like, and they have absolutely solidly convinced themselves that that's what they've got
Yeah.
wrong with them. By the time they come through the door,
And potentially the parents as well.
it's
Backing that up by
really
going,
difficult
oh
to,
yeah,
like,
you're right.
yeah, no, I know. It's difficult to get them to take a step back from that. So what I try and do, what my favourite phrase as a GP is, let's pretend for a moment that I don't know what anxiety is. Tell me how you feel. And I would say to any teacher that's listening that has this problem, use that phrase, because the walls instantly come down and they start being able to say, well, I feel like this sometimes, I feel like this sometimes. And you get more quality information out of them. How bad is it? Because that word means nothing when it just opens a conversation. They're saying it because they want to be seen, they want to be validated, they want help. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've got a diagnosis, because all those things can be true if life is really tough, but you still don't have to have a clinical diagnosis. So yeah, and then in that short consultation, you have to try and figure out what this is. And sometimes it's really obvious. I drink 12 cans of Monster a day, and my mum and dad have just had a divorce and I failed my exam. Yeah, well, obviously you're going to feel horrendous. Doesn't necessarily mean it's an anxiety disorder for medical reasons. And actually, as medics, what worries us more is when however you feel is incongruous to what's going on in your life. So if your life is not going well and you feel elated, that's not normal. If life is really good and you feel terrible and you felt really depressed and you can't function at all, and that's been going on for 4 weeks, that's depression. So by nature of it, diagnosis wise, things have to have been going on for a while. They have to be significantly affecting you. And most of what we see is not that. And it's things that we just want people to not panic so much and not label themselves so much. And yes, those real problems are there and they are happening. But if you have the right toolkit and you can improve and work on every single day, work on your mental well-being, some of that can be prevented. Some of it can, and you have to ride the storm, but if you have the right toolkit to know how to ride the storm, it'll be a little bit easier. And that's really why we've focused so much on that. And that's one thing I would say about this new RSHE curriculum, actually, is the mental well-being section is heavily focused on resilience and, feeling low. It's okay, it's normal to feel low when bad things happen. And obviously they've not written it like that. It's not, don't quote me, but essentially that's the right overall impression of it, is that that's what they want schools to be focusing on too, which I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think we see this. I see this in work as well. We talked about resilience and not having the skills, and generations being different. I get a lot of complaints, through employers and an older employee saying this younger generation just they don't have the life skills, or they don't know how to manage themselves. And where do we go wrong? And that's part and parcel.
Well, that may be true as well, right? I mean, that may be true in the sense that it's true. Maybe.
No, absolutely. And part of that,
really good at making a social media post, but not so good for other stuff.
But what I was going to go on to say is that this is part of that, is that distraction of the world that we're in, and social media, and not paying attention and learning in those areas, those basics, those foundational stuff, and at the expense of then. So the resilience will just not be there because it was never built, because they haven't paid attention to these areas. They're distracted. They're focusing too much on one thing, whether that's an addiction or just the way life is at the moment, and neglect from these other areas. And then they go out into leave school or leave home, whatever home looks like, and then they're in the big bad wide world on their own, and don't have those life skills to then manage their lives accordingly. The world of work, looking after yourself, paying your bills, all on your own. It's all on you. So that there's an element about parenting there. There's an element about the foundations, and there's an element about that generational difference. Not understanding the younger generation, what they're going through, and how do we help? How do we address? So that's why we're trying to get away from. There's lots of good resources out there for reactive treating people with like clinical issues like depression, and resources that are there to, you know, whether it's a breathing technique or an app or online like Mind or you know, Headspace or something. They're good and for their reactive component, but they're very specific. And so we want to go before that. We want to prevent them needing it in the first place. We want to go and, you know, build in all these areas across the board collectively, everybody, so that they by natural exploration and development themselves, they build their resilience so that they can face those challenges without, you know, or in a way that can help prevent these issues. It's not, you know, this is not the one solution. This is part of the solution that we offer. It is a strategic intervention. We want it to get out and get into schools and into homes, and people start using it and relying on it and benefiting from it. It's not all the solution though, because it does require parenting. It does require those influential adults. It does require all the input from teachers. So it's we've all got to do our bit to collectively, you know, make inroads here. But it is a societal issue, you know, and we've got to do something, and that's why we're so passionate about it, and why we're stepping away from that sort of medical career traditionally to move into this space, because it needs to be done, and we want to be effective. So we want to support the teachers who are already in a very difficult job, and the job to me, I don't know about you, but certainly I think you would agree with me, is only getting harder. You know, it's getting harder to teach. The reason you're there is to teach, you know, not to manage people's lives, to, you know, to be that, although you end up in that situation, to giving emotional support or problem solving in other areas, or giving, you know, dealing with financials. It's not your job to do that, although you understandably have to face and field a lot of those issues. So we're trying to help. We're trying to help in a way that powers up what you do.
Listen, I think that's a perfect sort of space to round things off. We've covered a lot. There's lots of things we didn't cover. I just want to say, you know, to everybody out there, if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you've got something from it, if you think that your students could benefit from some of this knowledge, this wisdom, this understanding, this discussion, then obviously head over to peachwellnessacademy.com, check it out. Launching on Tuesday, big day. So get over there, check it out, support it. And it's a great opportunity, actually, and it's very unique. I think the expertise there is fantastic. And I think it's a really, really amazing resource for teachers to be able to use in any lesson, really, in any context, and for students to be able to use, even, you know, within schools, beyond schools, whatever. I think it's excellent. And as you said, I think it really is something that is needed. I think there's a real necessity for material like this, especially some of the stuff that, as you said, is a bit more niche, and, you know, teachers might not have that knowledge on, or might be scared to discuss, or whatever it is. So I think there's some really, really powerful stuff in there. If you, just before I wrap up, is there anything you want to say in finality, Chris or Suzy, on this show on Teachers Talk Radio?
Well, after 3 years of building, researching, trialing with young people, that's us. We're good to go in 5 days. And if anyone is listening that's interested at all, if they head over now to the website and sign up now, to be on the mailing list, then you will get 15% off if you do convert for premium access as an individual parent or as a school. So we'd encourage you to do that now, and you'll get on Tuesday when we launch, you can get free access to have a play about and get used to the layout and the feel for it.
Yeah, and then hopefully you like it, and you will then convert up to being a customer, and we can come on this journey to collectively improve the health literacy of our young people. So welcome along. It's an exciting time, and we look forward to seeing you.
Amazing. Well, listen, guys, thank you ever so much for coming on TTR tonight. It's been a great conversation. Obviously, if you've watched this all the way through, we had a few comments on various different networks. Thanks to those people who have done that and who have been with us through the whole show. And also thanks to people who've dipped in. We're not like discriminating against you if you came and left. That's also fine. But yeah, if you want to access this, obviously we'll have it out there as a podcast. If you've just joined in the last 5 minutes or something, then
we've been trying to document our journey as you know, as a couple and a startup and everything on our social media channels too. So if anyone's interested in any of that,
Definitely. Where's that? Wait, is that through the website or is that through
you can
LinkedIn
do
or
it
is
through
that?
the website, or you can also search for us on LinkedIn, X, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.
Yeah, we're everywhere.
All of the above.
Brilliant. It's good to be everywhere. Guys, thank you so much. We'll be, I'm sure, talking about this on shows to come in various capacities. So good luck with everything for Tuesday. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Thanks very much, Chris and Suzy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Tom.
Thanks everyone for listening. See you later, guys.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused